Good afternoon, and welcome to Season 5 of Itasca Waters' Practical Water Wisdom Series, which focuses on issues related to water and ways to resolve those issues. I'm your host, Sandy Bottweiler. Today's episode is called Septic Compliance. Itasca Waters is a nonprofit volunteer organization headquartered in the Itasca Headwaters region of Minnesota for the purpose of educating folks about the value of clean water for the environment and the economy. Itasca Waters has provided 15 years of protecting and promoting clean water in the region, brought in $3 million in grants and contributions, all of which went for water science and education, educated thousands of students and community members, and strengthened local conservation capacity, and been recognized as a key nonprofit for lake and watershed stewardship. Although we are located in the headwaters of the Mississippi River, the Great Lakes, and Hudson Bay, you don't need to live near us to join us. Please consider becoming a member of Itasca Waters by using the QR code on your screen or going to itascawaters.org/donate and using the guest login. Membership is quick, secure, deductible, and is only $35. Now, we thank these sponsors who have been with us all along for helping Itasca Waters offer the Water Wisdom Series. As we mentioned, the subject for today is septic compliance, and our expert presenter is Katie Bennis, Director of Environmental Services for Itasca County. Katie oversees the county's septic, shoreland, planning and zoning, solid waste programs, and more. For today's program, we asked Katie to give us an overview of how septic systems are regulated, what standards and inspections are required, and how compliance helps protect public health, groundwater, and nearby lakes and streams. We expect plenty of questions from our audience today, so let's get to it. Let's start with Katie Bennis. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Sandy. Thanks so much for your introduction. I am looking forward to sharing some information with you today and, of course, to any questions that our audience might have. So let's just get started here. All right, well, once again, my name is Katie Bennis, and I am the Director of Environmental Services. I'm also a certified septic inspector. I'm certified through the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency, and I've been certified since, I don't know, probably the last 7 years. So anyways, let's get started. So what is the big deal about septic systems? First of all, subsurface sewage treatment systems, kind of informally we'll call them SSTS during this presentation, use soil to remove pathogens and contaminants from sewage before recycling it back into the water cycle. And about 25% of the nation's households use SSTS to treat wastewater. And about 33% of households in Minnesota rely on SSTS. So of course, that's a lot of households, and it's important to make sure that we're removing all those contaminants and pathogens, of course, before we recycle it back into our water cycle. Just because sewage goes away, just because it goes in the toilet and you flush it, doesn't mean that your septic system is functioning properly. We want to make sure that your septic system is using those proper physical, chemical, and biological processes to treat the sewage and effluent. A disposal system is really a relic of the past. And we're going to talk about some of those disposal systems and why they're no longer relevant, but they don't responsibly treat sewage. And as populations have grown around lakes and streams, of course, local regulatory programs and state regulatory programs have begun to address these issues and how we can sort of move on past those types of systems. So a good septic system is going to include several different components. Of course, it's going to include a watertight septic tank, a soil treatment area, so that's your drain fields. Sometimes that's a mound, it's not always a mound, but it's a drain field with appropriate soil conditions to treat the wastewater. It's also going to include proper operation, so we don't want to abuse our system with overuse or destructive cleaners. And it's also going to include a regular maintenance schedule. So the state, the University of Minnesota does all of the education for the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency, and licensed professionals are trained, and they've identified 5 different types of systems that you might see within the state of Minnesota. So there's a type 1 system, and that's kind of your primary, the objective system for residential treatment. These are full treatment systems. They include everything from a gravity system, pressure bed, or a mound system, and they will have your regulation 3 feet of unsaturated soil in the system. A type 2 system is going to be a holding tank or a privy, or another type of system that is installed within a floodplain. Within Itasca County, a holding tank system is certainly an adequate system, or a privy system is adequate. You can easily get a permit to do those types of systems. Other counties might have different types of regulations around those. But here in Itasca County, we have a lot of seasonal properties, and that just, so we work with homeowners a lot on those types of type 2 systems. We also tend to see a lot of type 3 systems in Itasca County, and a type 3 system is a system that needs to deviate from certain standards. And the reason we tend to see a lot of type 3 systems is because we have a lot of high water table here in Itasca County. And so the reason I say we see a lot of type 3 systems, a type 3 system will be a system that has, and in some cases, less than that 3 feet of unsaturated soil. So less than 12 inches of unsaturated soil. It might also be a system that's time dosed, or a system that's installed on fill or disturbed soils. So there's lots of different situations in which you might call a system a type 3. It's a type 1 that just for one reason or another kind of deviates from those technical standards in state rule. Then you have your type 4 systems, and those are systems which are using advanced technology like peat filters, or systems that are processing more than 2,500 gallons per day. And then type 5 systems, which are pretty rare here in Itasca County, but those are done under a state permit, and they are processing between 5,000 and 10,000 gallons per day. So this is just some interesting statistics for you about types of systems you might find in Itasca County. And kind of going back the last few years, so in 2023, these numbers are certificates of compliance. So systems that went in the ground in 23, 24, and 25, and were given certificates of compliance by the county. So 374 systems in 23, 301 in 24, and 273 in 25. And then of those systems, you're seeing the breakdown of type 1 versus type 2 versus type 3 and type 4. So just kind of like overwhelmingly, you're going to see those type 1 systems. And then, like I said, kind of a fair number of type 3 systems. Very few type 4. Type 4 systems in Itasca County are going to be required clearly if you're processing over 2,500 gallons per day. Oftentimes, if you are installing a new system at like a food and beverage establishment, or if you're applying for a variance for a lake setback for your septic system, you can't meet a drain field setback from the water. Our policy is that you're going to be putting in some type of advanced treatment. And then we also have, I have some statistics here about mounds to in-ground systems. So we get a lot of phone calls at environmental services about, do I have to put in a mound system? Well, no, you don't have to put in a mound system, but the ground on your property is going to dictate whether or not the site is suitable for an in-ground system versus a mound. And so that will be the determining factor about whether or not a mound is required. So you can kind of see it's usually about sometime between 65% about whether or not you're going to be putting in a mound in Itasca County. And that mound figure includes type 1 and type 3 mounds. All right. So any septic system, well, I shouldn't say any septic system, because of course type 2 systems look really different than this. But your components here of a septic system, and this is a pretty simple drawing here. You're going to start at the house. Sewage is going to leave the house through the building sewer, and it's going to go into a tank. Sometimes you're going to have more than one tank. You're going to have a septic tank or settling tank. Excuse me. Then it's going to go into possibly a pump tank. Sometimes you've got a single tank that's got multiple compartments. If you don't have a gravity system, there'll be some type of pump in that tank, which will then pump it to your drain field. And then, of course, like we've just talked about, there's lots of different kinds of drain fields. So now, getting to the meat of this here, now that we all kind of understand a little bit more about what your septic system is, how do we know if it's compliant? So there's a number of different triggers that will sort of instigate a compliance inspection. So of course, a homeowner can always request one. I don't know that that happens very often because the outcome could incur a lot of expense, but you certainly can request one if you have an interest in knowing what the status of your septic system is. But you will be required to get a septic compliance inspection if you are building a new home or rebuilding an existing home or adding a bedroom to an existing home. You will also be required to get a compliance inspection if you are applying for a variance here in Itasca County, or if you're transferring property. There are some exceptions for property transfers. I think I have a little bit more information about that on an upcoming slide, but property transfers that don't exceed a certain value might not trigger a certificate of real estate value, and in that case, you wouldn't. That wouldn't trigger a compliance inspection, but in most cases, the property transfer is going to trigger that compliance inspection. And then, of course, there are instances, and these don't happen that often, but it is in our local ordinance that a zoning official can deem it appropriate that you have a compliance inspection. So if we were to receive a call that a septic system isn't performing appropriately, say it's surfacing and it's absolutely failing to perform, someone could come out, one of us could come out there and then ask that it be inspected. So here's a little bit more about property transfers, because we do tend to get a lot of questions about this. So a septic inspection is a requirement of a property transfer, but there's also a written disclosure component of property transfer. And written disclosure is the obligation of a seller. They basically need to state in writing what they know about any septic systems on their property. And that's not only through that's not only a requirement through local ordinance, that's a requirement through state statute. So here's just kind of a picture of the Itasca County form that we use that you disclose. So if you've transferred property here in Itasca County, maybe you've seen this, you've worked with your realtor or your closing agent to complete this. But yeah, you just have to disclose what you've got on your property. And honestly, a lot of that's about safety. You've got buried tanks on property. You need to let people know that they're there. And then here, like I said, I was going to give you a little bit more about property transfers. So if you're transferring property, there are certain things that are certain sales that might be exempt from those property transfer rules. Say if you're transferring vacant property, if you're filing a transfer that doesn't exceed a certain amount, that certificate of real estate value, I think it used to be $1,500 that would trigger a certificate of real estate value, and very recently it changed. I think now it's $3,000. So sales that don't exceed $3,000 wouldn't trigger a certificate of real estate value and therefore wouldn't require a septic compliance inspection. Transfers of foreclosure property, if you're any dwelling or other buildings that are connected exclusively to municipal or any other approved city, city or other treatment facility. So, and then you can sell a property as is in Itasca County. We give you 2 years to bring that septic system into compliance. So you don't have to provide a certificate of compliance during a transaction, but then it becomes the responsibility of the buyer to get that done within 2 years of that transfer date. And that clock starts ticking on the date of transfer. And it doesn't, like if that buyer were to purchase and then sell a year later, the clock doesn't start ticking all over again. It's already started and it doesn't restart. So new systems are complied by the county. And I'll just state here that this differs from county to county. So very specifically, this is how Itasca County handles their SSTS program. So new systems are complied by a certified county inspector. So these systems are, new systems are completed in conjunction with a permit. They're new, like there's no system in the ground, you're putting something brand new in, you're replacing a system, taking something out and putting something new in its place, or altering a system. So replacing a major component, replacing a tank. You've got an existing tank and your drain field is being replaced. So that's an alteration system. So any one of those types of installations would require a new system compliance, and that's going to be evaluated by a county inspector. Those certificates of compliance are valid for a period of 5 years. A certificate of compliance is not a guarantee of operation. It's not a golden ticket that says, my system is guaranteed to work for 5 years. What that certificate of compliance is saying is that this system complies with the technical standards. So part of our compliance inspections is a soil verification, and that soil verification is usually completed prior to a system being installed. We'll go out and meet, and typically we'll meet with the installer because they have the equipment to dig a soil pit for us, and we will evaluate the soils there. The soil profiles are provided by a septic designer. So we'll be looking at that soil profile to make sure that what was provided in a septic design and what we're seeing on site match up. And then the other half of that inspection is the final inspection conducted before the final cover is applied on the system to make sure, once again, that those technical requirements are being observed. And I'm not going to walk through this entire checklist, but here's kind of a rundown of things that we are looking for when we're out there doing a final inspection. These are items that are listed on a septic design, outlined for an installer to include as part of their install, and then it's our responsibility to make sure that they were complied with, because it's all an important part of the system's operation. So once again, checking setbacks, making sure that they've observed those proper setbacks, making sure that they've got clean rock, clean sand, that they've backfilled all of their tanks, backfilled all of their pipes, making sure that lids have been secured on tanks so that, essentially that safety checks have been done, that they've insulated things that need to be insulated. Just a whole gamut of things to check for. All right. And then there's existing system compliance. And in Itasca County, existing systems are complied by licensed SSTS inspectors. And these are private contractors. So these are not county employees. These are individuals working out in the private sector. If a licensed SSTS inspector is coming to look at your system and evaluate it for compliance, they must submit their paperwork to the county within 15 days of completing that inspection. If that system turns out to be non-compliant, they must list the reasons for that non-compliance on that paperwork. And Itasca County requires that they use a state form to do that inspection with. It is considered compliant if it is not an imminent threat to public health, if it is not failing to protect groundwater, and in some cases, if it's meeting its operating permit. Not all systems require operating permits, only a handful of systems require operating permits. So compliance of the soil treatment area must be determined by conducting a new soil boring or by using documented soil borings from other independent parties, and they can acquire those prior documentation by contacting the county and looking for past soil borings on file from past designs or past inspections of that system. Just a few years ago, the state changed the rule for inspections, and inspections now need to be done on inspections of existing tanks now need to be completed when the tank is empty. So if you're having your system checked, you'll also need to have your system pumped. And that can be, there's a tank integrity form that can be completed by an inspector, but it can also be completed by a maintenance professional. So if you are someone who's thinking about selling your home, there's some timing involved here that you can kind of play with a little bit. That tank integrity form has like a lifespan of 3 years. So if you have your septic tank pumped this summer, you could have your maintenance professional complete that tank integrity form when they pump your tank, and you know you're selling your house next year. You have that form in hand, and you don't necessarily have to have that tank inspected next year as part of the sale. The compliance inspection still needs to be done on the other components of the system, but you have that tank integrity form and you don't have to pay for an additional pumping. So anyways, just something to kind of keep in mind. We're not always aware of that timing, and we can't always plan ahead for that, but if you know, you can keep that in mind and you can think about it. So just something to have in the back of your mind. Things that are not inspected or addressed in an existing system inspection are things like setbacks, the life expectancy of the system. Your SSTS inspector is not going to come out and tell you, oh, this system's you got 10 years left on your system. Once again, a certificate of compliance is not a guarantee of operation, and it is not a golden ticket of how much life you have left in this system, or even whether or not it's going to be working tomorrow. It is an inspection of whether or not it is working today. It's going to be valid for a period of 3 years unless something breaks tomorrow. So anyways, they're going to be, things they're also not looking for are like technical requirements set in state rule. So they're not looking for things like tank sizing or your perforation or your pump sizing or things like that in an existing system inspection. All right, so we've kind of danced around this a little bit, but I want to talk a little bit more about so I've talked a little bit about unsaturated soils and 3 feet of separation, and this is an important component to the operation of your system. So the state says you need to have 3 feet of unsaturated soil to treat pathogens and contaminants out of effluent, which is the liquid discharge out of your septic system, in order for it to be safe to return to the groundwater or the water cycle. So that's determining whether or not you have that is an important part of designing a system and also complying a system. So a septic inspector is going to have to do an inspection to find the limiting layer of on a site. So they'll usually use like a boring tool. If they're designing a system, they maybe will dig a pit. But you can kind of see here, this is a pretty good picture. I chose it because it's pretty clear. But they're going to be looking for not models, but redoxification in the soil, which is basically where water hits the soil and sort of liquefies the iron and rust in the soil and picks it up and moves it, and it tends to settle. So that is essentially where the limiting layer is. You can also have limiting layers at bedrock or at like heavily rocky soils, but when you hit those limiting layers, of course your effluent is going to stop and start moving horizontally instead of vertically, and your treatment is going to be inhibited. So anyways, you want 3 feet of vertical separation in order to treat that. So let me see here. If your system was built prior to 1996 and you're not in a shoreland area or a wellhead protection area or serving food, beverage, or lodging, you do get a reduction in your vertical separation requirement. That's for existing systems. You're allowed 2 feet of vertical separation for a compliance inspection. And for systems installed after 1996, if you're putting in like a mound system and going for a compliance inspection, the local authority can give like a 15% reduction in your separation distance because sand and sediment does settle a little bit. So anyways, there is some consideration for, like I said, older systems or for certain soil conditions like settling. So now let's get into what these major components of a failed system are. So a system would fail a compliance inspection if it is failing to protect groundwater. So systems that do not adequately treat sewage before it reaches groundwater would be considered failing to protect groundwater. So they don't have to be surfacing in order to fail. Types of systems that might fail to protect groundwater would be seepage pits, cesspools, dry wells, leaching pits. These are those old systems that I was talking about at the beginning, these disposal systems. They're often installed too deep and oftentimes too small in diameter to provide ideal treatment. In your soil treatment area, you're looking for aerobic conditions to get treatment. And these small diameter pits have anaerobic conditions. So you're not really getting the air movement through the soil to get great treatment. And you know, you might have like an example would be like a failing to protect groundwater. A good example might be like a block tank, things that were designed or just can't help but leak. So here's a great picture of an old block tank. And another immediate septic system fail would be an imminent threat to public health. So systems that are backing up into your home, surfacing in the yard, surfacing into water, or present any unsafe conditions, such as like an unsecured lid on a maintenance hole cover, or even a weak lid. They're using a lot of plastic lids on maintenance hole covers, and that is absolutely fine, but sometimes plastic that sits out in the sun can get weak over time. So, if a septic system lasts 20 to 30 years with great maintenance, a plastic lid may need to be replaced after a certain amount of time. So if that plastic is getting weak, and you have a compliance inspection and they determine that it's unsafe, it could be a failure. Now, that might be a really easy thing to fix to get your system compliant. Wouldn't it be great if that was the only thing you had to do to change the compliance of your system? But anyways, it could be considered an imminent threat to public health. So here's the picture that we've got here. That's a local picture taken by my colleague Greg. So that is sewage that's draining back there. Isn't that lovely? So we also get a lot of questions about gray water here. So you are not allowed to discharge gray water in Itasca County. Gray water is wastewater from bathing, washing dishes, or laundry, which does not contain toilet waste. So if you're discharging it to the surface, it is considered an imminent threat to public health. And imminent public health threats do need to be complied within 10 months. So like I was telling you, in property transfers, you get 2 years to bring a system into compliance. That timeline is reduced to 10 months if it is an imminent public health threat. So, and again, those repairs are going to be really site specific based on how that system is failing. So then I thought you might be just a little interested in the licensing requirements. So how does someone get to be an inspector? So any business that designs, installs, maintains, pumps, or inspects SSTS in Minnesota must be licensed by the MPCA. Homeowners are allowed to install SSTS on their own property in the state of Minnesota. They don't get to call a friend who's licensed by the MPCA and then just does it on the weekend and kind of like under the table. That's not how that works. They get to just do it on their own property. That's how that works. So Itasca County Environmental Services staff are considered certified SSTS inspectors. So we don't carry a business license, and we don't carry a bond and insurance, where a private contractor would. So the responsibilities of a basic inspector would, of course, be knowledge and ability to evaluate a site, a septic design, a system install, pumping and septic disposal activities, how to conduct a compliance inspection and permitting activities, to be able to issue written compliance certificates and notice of non-compliance, and to maintain inspection reports on different types of systems. And in order to get that, either that certification or that license, you have to complete coursework and test out of these classes: Introduction to On-Site Systems, Installing On-Site Systems, Basic Design of On-Site Systems, a Soils class, an Inspection of On-Site Systems, and then there's continuing education for professionals. You have to do 12 hours every 3 years with a focus of 6 hours on soils. And then you have to do experience to gain your licensure also. So you have to observe 15 system inspections with at least 1 above ground and 1 below ground. And then you have to observe 5 soil evaluations, 5 system designs, 5 management plans being developed, and attend 5 system installations and 5 service instances. So like 5 pump outs of a septic system. So if you are abandoning a septic system, which means like we were talking about earlier during property transfers. Let's say you're transferring a piece of property and you're going to trigger that compliance inspection, but the house is getting removed and the septic system isn't needed. And instead of bringing it up to compliance, you're like, well, I'd just rather get rid of the septic system. Okay, so the option then is to abandon a system. And that's absolutely fine, but there is a process for that. So if you're going to abandon a septic system, you do need to remove all solids and liquids from a tank. And they have to be removed by a licensed maintenance business. All electrical devices and devices containing mercury must be removed and disposed of properly. And you need to crush and backfill all tanks. You can't leave any like underground cavities. Can't leave underground cavities open in the ground, and you can't allow for any future discharge to that system. So soil treatment areas can be left in the ground, and it's sometimes better to leave them there. If you're going to bring contaminated materials up from the ground, it just increases the potential for contamination, and there's just a lot more to handle and dispose of. So I almost recommend just leaving the soil treatment stuff in the ground. The most important thing is to crush and backfill that tank. But you do need to record that abandonment on a form and file that with the local government unit, and that's environmental services. All right. So here's just some, like I said, one of the more important components of your septic system is your operation and maintenance. So let's just talk about a few tips and tricks for operation and maintenance. So control your water use. Don't wait. If you've got leaky faucets and fixtures, don't wait to get those repaired. Make sure that you are addressing those concerns right away, particularly if you're a snowbird and leaving for the winter. Slow leaks into your pipes could build up ice and then cause backups. And that's definitely something you don't want, especially when you're gone for this season. So if you can install low water use fixtures like toilets and shower heads, that's awesome to reduce your water usage. Wash only full loads of clothing and dishes and reduce your length of showers and number of toilet flushings. Some people might have a hard time stomaching that one, but if it's only you and a spouse living in a house, that's a lot easier. Reroute your water softener discharge out of the septic system. So water softener is kind of like one of the things that you can discharge onto the ground. There's not very many things in your house that you can do, but the water softener is one of them that can be discharged to the ground surface because it doesn't touch your clothes, it doesn't touch your food, it doesn't touch your body. So it's not considered gray water. So, and then also this is just really good habit, spread out your water usage. So do a load of laundry every day. The old habit of laundry day when everything gets done in one day is not best practice. Doing one load of laundry a day and spreading out your water usage even throughout the day is a good habit. Also, don't put harmful products into your septic system. Reduce and eliminate harsh cleaners and disinfectants. If your septic system, like I said, is doing a lot of chemical and bacterial processes, if you are putting antibacterial products into your system, it's killing the things that are making your system work. So don't go crazy using bleaches and cleaners. A little bit of bleach is fine, but if you're scrubbing your floors with bleach and cleaning your toilets with bleach and doing all your laundry with bleach, too much of a good thing is too much. Dispose of solvents and paints properly. Environmental Services has a household hazardous waste program, and you can contact us to set up an appointment to drop all that stuff off. Don't flush it down your system. Same thing with unused and unwanted medications. I know some people like to flush those down the drain, but you absolutely don't need to do that. The Sheriff's Department has a take back program for medication. You just need to walk in and drop it off in their take-back bin. There's several pharmacies in town also that do take-back programs. So bring those things in. Don't flush them down the drain. Should only put human waste and toilet paper down the toilet. Don't flush diapers. Don't flush flushable wipes. Those things are not flushable. Don't flush feminine hygiene products. Keep grease, keep lint, coffee grounds, and food particles out of your drain. Those types of things clog up in your tank. They clog up in your in the laterals, the pipes that serve your drain field. They're just they're not good for your system, so keep them out. At my house, I like to keep grease in a soup can or a spaghetti jar, and then it can be easily disposed of in the garbage. And you don't need to put any additives to enhance your system's performance. I know you can find them on store shelves, but your system is perfectly designed to work on its own. It's a well-oiled machine, and it doesn't require any additives to enhance it. If you've got a problem that needs diagnosing, you should contact a professional, and they can help you figure that out. All right, and lastly, we've got regular maintenance. So you should be completing maintenance, so that's pumping, at least every 3 years, sometimes 2 to 3 years. If you've got a system, your maintenance professional might recommend more. I live in an older house. My system's a little small for my 5-person family, so I have my system pumped more regularly than that. If you've got an alarm on your system, you should attend to any alarm on your system. If it's going up, don't wait. And if you've got a filter on your septic system, a lot of designers will include like an effluent filter that's on the back part of your tank. It might seem like a gross job. There's plenty of gross jobs in house ownership. Got to pull that filter out, spray it down with a hose, put it back in. It's not a big deal. It's just part of house maintenance. All pumps and motors should be routinely checked for proper operation. If you've got a weak pump, contact your septic professional, get it replaced. Yeah, inspect. Baffles are in your tank. They're designed to be in your tank to kind of help things from backflowing into the pipes on either end. So again, if you're having clogs, you can go check, or you can have a septic professional come and check for you to make sure that your baffles aren't getting clogged. But again, if you're not flushing things that shouldn't be flushed down there, hopefully you're not getting clogs in the baffles. So anyways, that's what I have for you today. I hope that you found that instructive.
I think we did. Thanks, Katie. Katie Bennis with us today. It's time now to get to the questions. Handling this part of today's program is Jan Sandberg, Itasca Waters board member and Education Committee Chair.
Thanks, Sandy. Hello, and welcome to the Q&A section for today's program. Please submit your questions in writing by clicking on the Q&A icon. We're not going to use the chat function today. I'm going to read the questions out loud, and they will be answered by Katie Bennis. Let's see. We might have to combine some similar questions, and we might not get to all of your questions. If you have additional questions, please email us at info@itascawaters.org, and we will get to them. We will try and get back to you. Okay, our first question for Katie. How can landscaping choices help or harm a septic system?
Oh, interesting question. So landscaping, let me see here. First of all, you will want to keep trees and large rooty vegetation away from your drain field and your tank, because roots could potentially infiltrate those things and cause problems as they grow. So in terms of trees, I would say you'll want to avoid trees. Landscaping, a lot of people will use like mulches and things like that to cover a septic system during winter months. And that would be fine. You can mow over your system. I'm not landscaping. I mean, I wouldn't plant a garden on it. You wouldn't. I'm trying to think of what they mean by landscaping. It really, you wouldn't want to plant a garden on it. It really should just kind of be I would keep it as inconspicuous as possible. It's maybe the best way to say that. Your septic installer is going to plant it with a final cover and grass, and that's probably what you want to leave it to. You don't want to let it overgrow too much, and you don't want to manicure it either, because a lot of traffic over that is going to potentially compress the soils in that area. And so, like I said, just kind of keeping traffic and keeping vegetation at a healthy level is probably the best recommendation I could offer.
And that makes sense to me. Well, Anne asked, how many horizontal feet can a system be from a cabin? Like 200 feet, 1,000, 100?
How many can it be from a cabin?
How many horizontal feet can the system be from a cabin? Perhaps she means, should a system be from a cabin? I'm not sure.
Well, so that is really a question for a septic designer, and I am not a licensed septic designer. I attended a design class, but I'm not a licensed septic designer. There is a setback requirement for a septic drain field to it. The rule calls it an occupied structure, and that setback requirement is 20 feet from an occupied structure to a drain field, or 10 feet from an occupied structure to a tank. And the primary reason for the setback is just so that those structures aren't interfering with either the maintenance or the installation or the long-term operation of that system. But in terms of how far can it be, that's a matter of topography and like hydraulics. That's really going to be considered by your designer. They've got to figure out how they can get water to flow over, water and sewage, water and solids to flow over distance. Sometimes they might need to install like a grinder pump either in a basement or next to the home in order to get sewage uphill to a septic tank. But again, this is all very site specific, and that's going to be something your septic designer is going to determine.
That sounds good. Can you explain the difference between what the inspector determines and what the county decides? How do you work with the inspector? How do those roles work together in the compliance process?
So I would say that the county inspectors and the private inspectors are doing two different jobs. Okay. The county inspectors are working on new systems, and the licensed inspectors are working on existing systems. The county is here as a resource. If an existing system inspector is struggling to evaluate, let's say they're using a past soil log from a previous inspection, and they're out there looking at soils, and they're really struggling with what they're finding. They just don't agree with what a past inspector has found. We can be here as a resource to help kind of settle a dispute, as it were. But ultimately, we're serving two separate purposes there. We're running in our own lanes, really.
Well, Karen has a very interesting question. How do you determine whether a failing drain field could be rehabilitated versus needing to be replaced?
Again, that is something that I would leave to a private contractor because the county is working on new systems and not existing systems. So I would leave that to a private professional. And it really is probably going to depend on the problem. Like I was talking about earlier, if your system is failing and it's because of a bad maintenance hole cover, that's an easy fix. Let's say you've got a sagging supply pipe. So that's or a sewer pipe, sagging sewer pipe, or a cracked, maybe you've got like a cracked sewer pipe or something like that. That's a relatively easy fix. You can dig that up, and replacing that pipe doesn't even require a permit. But other types of fixes might not be so easy. If your system is failing because the ground underneath your drain field has been saturated for a certain length of time, so something builds, there's a substance that builds up under your drain field. It's called biomat. It's kind of like a black, oily substance. And that, once again, kind of all that effluent continues hitting that ground and it builds up this biomat. And that's going to inhibit the soil from absorbing and treating your effluent. And once you've got that biomat built up there, your system's pretty much, it's hard to rehabilitate that soil. So then you're pretty much looking at replacing that system. So it's very, very site specific.
Whoa. Okay. Now the next question from Anne, I think has two parts. So I'm going to break it into the two parts because I'm not sure they're linked. The second part was, is there a recommended distance to keep septic lines or tanks from trees? Not just shrubs, but trees.
There's no prescribed distance.
No, okay. Because I know people often clear them out when they put in a new system. Okay, that was curious. Well, her next question, I'm not sure if she means pine trees or pine boughs. Can pine trees prevent freezing in winter, or is straw the answer? And maybe that's for the tank versus
I don't know that I've necessarily seen a lot of people use pine boughs. Mulch, straw.
Straw I've seen.
I think would be much more common solutions for insulating your tank.
Okay. I think
or drain field. I'm sorry, or drain field. Yeah.
Okay.
Much more common solutions for insulating your drain field.
Two different parts. Let's see. I think no, wait, I think we can do at least one more question. What changes in the existing rules are we likely to see in the next few years? Are you hearing anything about what might be coming that we might have to think about in the future, near future?
I think it depends on who you ask. I'm part of a group of planning and zoning administrators from across the state, and they are forming, they've got a group who is working, they have a committee formed to kind of develop a list of concerns and issues that they might bring to the MPCA as a hopeful list of considerations that they might address in the rule. But I think that the MPCA doesn't have any strong desire to make any rule changes in the next couple years. So,
and I can understand why. Okay, we're almost at the end of our time for questions. I guess if you could give homeowners one big takeaway, one thing they should think about based on your presentation, what would it be?
Pump your tanks every 3 years.
Okay, and actually I need to do that in the next few weeks. So thank you very much.
Yeah.
And I think that's all we have time for today. So Sandy, back to you.
Thank you very much, Jan, and thank you very much, Katie Bennis. This program will be available soon on our website, itascawaters.org. Please feel free to recommend it to family, friends, and neighbors. Also, we're asking for your ideas about the Water Wisdom series. You can respond to the evaluation form we'll email you. The next program will be on August 6th, 2026, and feature Austin Steer, Itasca County Soil and Water Conservation District, talking to us about volunteer conservation, what you can and can't do to your lakeshore. You can register for free on itascawaters.org. While you're on the website, please consider becoming a member at itascawaters.org/donate or follow the QR code on screen. I'm Sandy Bottweiler. Thank you for watching today.